evening, everybody. It is Bible study time, and I, for one, am excited. We are continuing in John's Gospel. John chapter 1 is where we'll be, and if you are in the Christological book, it'll be page 7 again. And we're probably going to end up finishing this section. I'm not 100% sure. We'll see how much time we have. As always, I like to keep the Bible studies under 30 minutes, so we don't get, I keep it under 30 minutes so we don't, we don't want to get overwhelmed, and so we don't want to, I don't ever want anybody to sit there thinking they have to be sitting here for the entire, hour, 2 hours of me talking. So, we're a day late. Fun story. Yesterday, I am glad that we are not meeting in person right now. Let me fix the camera a little bit. I am not sick, so nobody worry about that. That's not what I was getting to. But last night we ate dinner. What do we have? We had Mediterranean burgers. Like a burger and a pita wrap. I don't think anybody cares what it was. But anyways, after we ate, Rachel was like, oh, can I go to Walmart? And it was like, we ate early. I think it was like 4:30. So I was like, yeah, it was 5 o'clock. And she came home at like 5:30 or 6 or whatever it was. And I fell asleep the second she came home. And I slept until about 10 last night. And I woke up to just messages asking, where is there any Bible study? Did I miss it? And people were like, I hope he's okay. I'm okay. Everything's okay. I was tired, apparently. And we'll get to it eventually, but in the Gospels, there's a good nap story. Anyways, all right, verse 6 in John chapter 1, there was a man. So John goes into something here that we're going to talk about, and then we'll continue. So there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. So before we get into the rest of the Christological statement here, we won't dock your pay. Well, I'm doing it tonight, Wendy. So, like if I didn't do it tonight, you could dock my pay, I guess. But I'm doing it tonight, so you can't dock my pay. Right. Rachel forgot it was Bible study too. When I woke up at 10, I was like, how come you didn't wake me up? And she was like, you were sleeping on the couch. I'm like, it's a terrible reason. I'm like, Bible study was last night, or was tonight. And she was like, oh, I forgot. And I'm like, all right. Anyways, it's important to note a couple of things. Why does John the Evangelist include John the Baptist here in this section? If you remember last week, and if you remember what we're going into here in a moment, you will see that it almost doesn't fit if you don't understand what the Baptist is doing here. What the Evangelist was doing here by mentioning John the Baptist. In the first 5 verses, it's the preeminence of Christ, if you will. From 10 on, except for one little sidetrack here, it is again back to the preeminence. It's this big Christological statement of who Christ is and how Christ is fully God, and even he was in the world, but he was not of the world, and despite living in the world, he created the world, as we'll see in a minute in verse 10. So these 2 verses are so important, though, because John the evangelist, the gospel writer, St. John the Apostle, if you will, he is reminding these people of somebody that they knew. He's reminding them of John the Baptist. And he's saying, do you not remember when John was out there speaking this? Or have you not heard the stories of what John did? Or do you not know of John's disciples who are sharing what John was calling? That John was calling for the light. That John was saying that something greater was coming. Warren Wiersbe brings it up as well. I just had it. John was sent to be this witness to Jesus Christ, to tell people that the light had come into the world. So John is, Whereasby continues that John is this Elijah figure. The nation of Israel was blind to what was about to happen, to their spiritual advantages that they had. They were blind to their own Messiah. And witness becomes this key word. John ends up using it as a noun 14 times and a verb 33 times. And John the Baptist is this first witness that the evangelists introduce here. And as you study John's gospel, and as we study John's gospel, we'll see this. We'll see that the evangelist mentions the Baptist many times. The other thing I wanted to bring up about John the Baptist is that John the evangelist here, also the writer, also brings up an important part of who John was and was not. And if I can find it. I had something here in the book, but I forget where it went. Anyways, it's important. I'll paraphrase it. I won't quote it word for word, I guess. It's important. This is an important note because there are people that were rejecting Christ still because they had believed that John the Baptist was this holy man. And when you read into the Gospels, as we'll go into them, you will actually see this comparison a lot between John the Baptist and Jesus. Who was holier? Who was more righteous? Who was considered the better person, if you will? And it's important that John points this out, that John never wanted to be the better person. John never was trying to be more righteous. I think Jesus, I don't remember if it's in John's Gospel or not, but I know Jesus says this at one point in one of the Gospels where he says, John will be the least in heaven. And that's not an insult towards John. It's not an insult towards, there was no rivalry between the two cousins at all. But rather, it was this understanding of the kingdom. It was this understanding of what was happening here. And for John the Baptist was a servant calling out darkness and bringing them the light. He was the first witness. He was the first evangelist, if you will. And it's important to understand who he was. And so John gives us this in the prologue, because later on he will talk about John again, John the Baptist. Verse 10, this is Christ, he was in the world, but the world was created through him, and yet the world did not recognize him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, he gave them the right to be children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of natural descent, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. This next section is super cool because it not only again shows back to John's ministry of John being that witness to the Jewish people, but it gives the salvation call, like boom, right away. For those who are reading this, and I've said it, John's probably writing to more of a Christian audience, but at the same time, while he's writing to a Christian audience, he is reminding them that the gospel is ever present for everybody. That they weren't Christians because they were like, super righteous. And they wouldn't even been called Christians at this point still. They would have been followers of Christ. They would have been followers of the way. They would have been disciples. Some of them would have still recognized themselves as Jewish people. A lot of the anti-Semitic Christianity that would come doesn't happen for a little bit here. Maybe at this point they separated themselves, depending on where you date John's gospel, because there is the fear that in Roman territories, because the Jewish people are causing these uprisings, that the Christians would be treated worse off in some cases. But even then, that's more of that's a fear that causes the anti-Semitism. Wrong book. That is the book we're going to continue to read, but that's not what I wanted to grab. Where is? Any closer, and it would have been me. All right. Pate touches on this as well, and so does Wiersbe. But I just want to read Pate here. It is the great irony the greatest irony is recorded here in the Gospel of John. Jesus, the Jewish Messiah, is rejected by the Jewish people. Like God's wisdom of old who offered life to men was rejected, so Jesus, the wisdom of God, was rejected by the world. The word world, cosmos, occurs 3 times in verse 10. In the fourth gospel, the term has 3 different meanings. First, world means the natural creation. This is the beginning there in 10 where he says the world was created. Second is humanity, which we'll see later on, like John 3:16, for example. For God so loved the world. Well, he loves his creation, but he's talking about those who are in his creation specifically. The third is the world in the flesh. You see that at the end of this verse, actually. The world being in the end there, the world did not recognize him. So when you see the word world, and if it is cosmos as it is in the Greek, this is one of those times where normally I would say the Greek has enough words compared to the English, but this is one of those times that I wish that the Greek authors would have used different words here, because a lot of times this can create debate. And what is happening in John's time and before is that people were actually debating whether any part of the world was good. Some of the Gnostics would do this, where they would reject any type of world, any type of flesh, any type of reality, if you will. And they were so spiritual that even just like, for example, sitting here right now, they would be upset that I have a wooden table because the wood is made made from creation. They would be upset that that I'm gonna shave my head tonight because the hair is getting a little long there, and they would be upset at that because it would be something of vanity to try to show off my flesh, and not the literal flesh, but the flesh, if you will, to show my looks off instead of just letting it grow and look raggedy. They would be upset at those who would even argue that Christ was man because they didn't believe that the world had any good, including the flesh. And so how could God be man? And so these arguments would come out. And so and it's because of this lack of defining thing of the word world. So you have to kind of look through the word and see sometimes. And this is where good commentaries come in. As you're reading the Bible, let's talk about commentaries for a minute as I get up and grab. Commentaries or study Bibles also are good. I'm going to grab a study Bible. Not because I'm going to use it, because I just want to show it. And I'm going to grab... I talked about a couple commentaries last week, but I want to grab another commentary. Give me a second. These are a couple of my favorite commentaries. If you could see me bending over looking in the cabinet, sorry. Hopefully all you saw was just me bent over. Anyways, these are some of my favorite commentaries, and I didn't grab the ones for John because I just wanted to grab them off the shelf. But commentaries are a great tool to have when you get to a verse like verse 10. So let's read verse 10 again, and then I'll explain why they're good again, why they're good to have. Verse 10 says, "He was in the world, and the world was created through him, and yet the world did not recognize him." Okay, so the world. What is that first definition of the word world? Pate wrote that it is the creation, and we see that because he was in the world, and the world. The second one, in the second one being the world was created through him. So what about that third one? The world did not recognize him. Does that mean that Jesus was walking down the street and trees were like, "Who's this guy? Like, who's..." No, it's not that. And this is where a good commentary comes in. That's why Pate says it's not that it's the creation, and it's not that it is humanity that didn't recognize him. Because if creation doesn't recognize him, then Christ is a liar when he says that the rocks would cry out for me. And if it's humanity doesn't recognize him, then how did any of the apostles see who Christ was? How does the guard that's standing next to Christ, the centurion, I believe, standing next to Christ? No, it's a guard. Standing next to Christ at the crucifixion, look at him and say, "Surely this must be the Son of God." So it's not humanity either, because even if it is humanity, how do we recognize him? No, instead it's this. It's the evilness of the world when this term is used here. Sometimes you'll see it used as flesh, sarx. Sarx is the English. Sarx is the Greek translation, the Greek word, and flesh is the human translation. But it's this idea of sinfulness. Those who are in sin don't recognize him. Those who want to stick with their sin. So commentaries are good because they help you. So a couple of good commentaries. The Expositor's Bible Commentary, very simple one. This one's Romans. I have a few of them. This is the soft cover. The hardcover is blue. They're edited by Frank Gabeline, and they are, he's the general editor, but they're all different authors. This one, for example, is Everett Harrison. But that's a good one. The Yale Bible Commentary. I don't have it on me. I have a digital copy, so that's why. Is another good one. Thomas Oden edited the Ancient Christian Commentary on Scriptures, and I showed this, and I'm actually using this for the Gospels as well, but I showed this for Philippians, and we used it during Philippians, and this one's good because it gives all these different ancient church commentaries. And then another good tool is just having a good study Bible. This is my favorite study Bible. It is the Reformation Study Bible, and R.C. Sproul, Dr. R.C. Sproul was the general editor of it. And I have, I think I have 2 copies of this. I have the original and the revised edition. And these are great because if you have a good study Bible, and I mean this, a good one, making sure it's a good editor, making sure it's somebody who knows the word. If you want a recommendation, let me know. As you're reading through it, you will be able to get so many other things. So like last week, for example, we talked about the Logos. This has like a half a page on the Logos. You know, that word. It has a half a page on it. So these are tools that are useful. They are good. And there's others too. I can always recommend, if you're looking for a specific book commentary, I can always recommend authors that I've used that I like. And if you're looking for like a general one, I always have recommendations. Like last week, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, maybe it was last week, I had recommended Wiersbe. Warren Wiersbe is one of my number one like general commentators that I always recommend to people. And so these are good because it helps you dissect the word. So like I'm using for this one, for example, for this specific thing, I'm using the Writings of John, which is a commentary, although it goes a little deeper than that, by Marvin Patty. And he dissects this verse because this is a complicated verse. Okay, continuing. And if you felt like I got off subject there, listen, and no one's ever told me, well, my father tells me all the time, but I don't count him. But if you think I got off subject there going on this little tangent about commentaries, the reason is because I don't want to be your one source of knowledge for the Bible. The day I'm the one source, like this is it, like you read the Bible or you have a question with the Bible and the only person you talk to is me about it, it's not healthy. Now, with that being said, yes, there should be like, if you have a question, ask me, of course. But if I can point you to look deeper on your own into certain commentaries, then I'm doing my job better. And the reason for that is it goes to that saying, if you give a man a fish, you fed him for a day. If you teach him how to fish, you feed him for life. It's the same here. If I give you just statements about the scriptures and study, great, you learn something. But if I teach you how to do the research while we're doing this, then hopefully you can go from there and do it on your own. Okay, verse 10, we went over. Verse 11, he came to his own. These are the Jewish people. And his own people did not receive him. But to all who, this is the great irony that we had just talked about. But to all who did receive him, he gave them the right to be children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of natural descent or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. Now, this is interesting because we talked about this a couple weeks ago in Sunday morning service, where we talked, maybe like 2 months ago, actually, where we talked about Abraham's birth line and the right of the Gentile to be in Abraham's birth line. I pointed out none of us were Jewish, and I've been corrected since. Gary Stevens told me that he is, in fact, part Hebrew. And so I only bring that up because now I know that at least Gary is good. Gary's safe. None of us, none the rest of us aren't, but Gary is. And so Gary is, I forget to plug in my laptop. Hold on. So Gary has the inheritance, but the rest of us, we have the inheritance not because of, it's not like a, oops. I am, there we go. Nope, I don't know what that is. And it's unplugged. There we go. Okay. Okay. Perfect. All right. Like I was saying, John is bringing up something we talked about in Romans. I'm going really fast. Wow. Okay. Speed is back to normal. Okay. So, in case anybody was wondering what fell, it was a product from American Oak. Anyways, like I was saying, John is talking about something that Paul touches on in the book of Romans as well. That we as... What's up?
What fell?
A bottle. Is that what you came to check on?
Yeah, I heard something fall. I was making sure you were okay.
You want to grab me a water while you're right there?
Yeah.
Cool. You can say hi to the beautiful people. So... They can't see you. There she is. Okay. So John is talking about something that Paul brings up in Romans, that our Christianity isn't based on something that we have somehow inherited, for example, in the sense that we're not saved, we're not children of God because of our relationship to Abraham. After all, if it was that simple, I wouldn't be here, because the reality is I wouldn't be a Christian. Paul and John both touch on it, that it's also not, as John says here, and I love this, it's not the will of our flesh or the will of man. So no matter how hard we try, we're not Christian because we tried hard enough. And that's a relief to me, because there are days where I don't try hard enough. And I don't mean that like in a I don't mean that in a statement of, oh man, I'm so, I go around and sin. No, it's not that. But if I had to show my faith daily, like in Islam, for example, in Islam, you have to do the 5 prayers. You have these pillars of Islam, as they're known as. You have to do pilgrimages. You have to do the 5 prayers. You have to do certain things you have to do. And I took Islam studies my senior year of college, so it's been a while. But my point being is that you have to earn your righteousness. You have to prove that you're righteous. And for us as Christians, we don't have to prove that. We don't have to sit there thinking, oh man, did I do this 6 times? Because otherwise, if I die tonight, I'm going to hell. No. It's in his hands. As John says, it's of God. We receive this. We receive the right to be children. And we even receive the belief of God. To me, that's a beautiful statement. It's a beautiful reality. And it's scary if you are frightened by the idea that there is this sovereign God in control. But for me, it's glorifying. When I read, for example, the book of Job or the Psalms or even some of the New Testament, like Romans, there's these statements of, who are you, O man, to question? And it reminds me and humbles me and realizes I serve something better. I serve something bigger, and I serve something greater. John's given us that reminder this evening. John continues in verse 14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We observed his glory, the glory as the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John, the Baptist, testified concerning him and explained, This was the one of whom I said, the one coming after me ranks ahead of me, because he existed before me. Going back to the preeminence. Indeed, we have all received grace upon grace from his fullness. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the one and only Son, who is himself God and is at the Father's side. He has revealed him. This is this beautiful Trinitarian statement, this beautiful, if you will, Christological statement of who Christ is, the preeminent one. John writes, that he was, and I paraphrased it using a bigger word there, but he has always existed, as the Baptist exclaims through John's gospel. Again, it brings to mind that there is something greater going on. John is setting the stage that everything we're about to read in his gospel is because of the one true God. Because of something God has done beyond us, beyond our understanding sometimes. John ends it with this comparison of the law and grace. And I think it's a beautiful statement because it reminds us that the Old Testament is important, that the law is important. For the law was given through Moses and it is from God. And what the law does is the law shows us who God is. The law points us to this grace and loving and merciful and just God. But then he says, but grace and truth are given through Christ. For no one has seen the Father, because none of us were perfect in the law. By the law standards, we failed. And if we're being honest, if we were to, I don't know, let's do a quick experiment. I hope, but here we go. Don't muzzle an ox while it's trying to... Okay, none of us have ever done that. Hold on, I'm looking for an obscure law. Ah, beautiful. Clothing laws. Yep, this one's good. Okay. It says, do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material in Leviticus 19:19. Later on in the Levitical law, in the Mosaic law, we see make tassels on the four corners of the cloak you wear. In Numbers, it actually gets really specific. You're going to make tassels on the corners of your garments with a blue cord on each tassel. You will have these tassels to look at, so you remember all the commands of the Lord, that you may obey them and not prostitute yourself by going after the lust of your own hearts and eyes. All right. Show of hands. How many of us have broken that today? The law showed God is very precise and very nuanced. He knew we would sin. He knew we would break the law. And that was actually the perfect example for me today. To show that he knew so much that we'd break the law. He wanted us to wear tassels. Tassels on our garments. So we would stare at them, blue ones, so we would stare at them and say, I'm a sinner. But I'm going to remember your law today, God. We weren't allowed to wear mixed linens. This shirt is definitely not 100% cotton. And these laws, I know people are like, when you hear these laws, they seem silly, but there was a reason for them in the Jewish times. But they're not laws for us today because they're ceremonial laws. They're not religious laws. They're civil laws sometimes that are no longer needed. But what's amazing about them is that they all point to the need for a Savior, to the need for a Redeemer. And the Old Testament as a whole points that way. And the New Testament reveals this wonderful God, this wonderful Savior, this wonderful Redeemer. So, as we dig in, we're going to really kick off the Gospels. I'm not being tongue-in-cheek, but I am. Because, yeah, the next couple weeks we're really kicking off the Gospels. I knew it. We look at Mark and Luke's prologue next week, and possibly begin some of the genealogy in Matthew and Luke. And I am excited. I actually really am. I love the genealogy. We may spend a few weeks on the genealogy because there's some cool stuff. But let's pray as we end our Bible study tonight. Lord, I thank you that you are revealed to us. God, I am excited to continue to reveal you, to see you through your Son, through the Gospels. Lord, I ask that you would be present in our lives this week, this weekend. Help us, oh God, to trust you and understand you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, everybody. I have dogs howling in the background. I have children crying. I'm going to help Rachel out. With all that being said, God bless. If you need anything, I am here for you. Feel free to give me a call or a message or whatever. And I'll see everybody Sunday. Or you'll see me.